My guest today is Michael Grade. Lord Grade is a former chairman of the BBC and BBC One controller. He has also held the roles of Channel 4 chief executive and the executive chairman of ITV PLC, so it's safe to say that Lord Grade's experience and knowledge of British broadcasting is without rival. In 2011, he was made a life peer and made Baron Grade of Yarmouth. Lord Grade, thank you very much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Pleasure, thanks.
So you have had an extraordinary career in television. What would you say were particular highs or lows or memorable moments?
Well, there are lots of highs, sort of wonderful programs that somehow one was in a position not to make myself, but to commission across all the channels I work for. You know, at London Weekend Television, we launched the South Bank show with Melvyn Bragg. We did all kinds of marvellous things there. At the BBC, I commissioned The Singing Detective. I helped a great deal on the Live Aid event. I'm still a trustee with Bob Geldof of the charity. At Channel 4, the big thing was really moving Channel 4 from being a dependent of ITV to selling our own airtime, raising our own revenue, and becoming an independent, standalone broadcaster. So that was a good time. And then when I went back to the BBC as chairman, it was to pick up the pieces when the place was falling apart in the aftermath of the Hutton inquiry and the resignation of the chairman and the firing of the director general. So it was quite a mess to sort out, which I did. And then ITV asked me to go back, sort them out as executive chairman, which I had fun doing. So there we are.
Quite the career. Now, in a moment, we're going to talk about the recent anti-Semitic incident on Oxford Street. But first, I'm wondering, was your Jewish identity ever an issue during your career at all?
Never has been. I mean, I've met anti-Semitism, particularly at school, public school, and occasionally in the old days in the city.
Yeah.
People didn't really know I was Jewish. I had a fairly low profile in those days. And you'd often hear some sort of rather nasty anti-Semitic remark at lunch, a sort of joke or something horrible. But in terms of my career, no, it's never been an issue as far as I know. I mean, I am part of that elite group of Jews who run the media throughout the world and control everything that people see. Yes, I'll admit to being part of that.
Well, we're all part of that, apparently.
Yes, and the banks.
Of course.
Banks as well. And it's never been an issue for me in that regard. No.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. Now, I would like to turn to the recent anti-Semitic incident on Oxford Street when a group of Jewish teenagers celebrating Hanukkah were accosted by a group of thugs yelling anti-Semitic insults and swearing, and who then violently attacked the bus to which the teenagers had retreated. I want to ask you, Lord Grade, what was your reaction to the incident?
Well, the incident is horrible. We've been through a period the last decade and the decade before that, when anti-Semitism has been low profile. People have managed to hide their anti-Semitism. But in the last five years or so, not least through the Corbyn era of the Labour Party, there was a sense in which the Corbyn era gave you permission to be anti-Semitic in an overt way, and that's really disturbing, very, very disturbing, and it's horrible. And this example in Oxford Street is, I'm afraid, one example of that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you touch on that, because from Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party to flare-ups whenever there is a conflict between Hamas and Israel, and from social media to university campuses. I'm wondering, do you think anti-Semitism has become worse in the UK over your lifetime, or has it simply adapted?
It's always been there. But what has happened in recent times is that it's more overt.
Right.
Much more overt. I mean, this stems from the far left.
Yeah.
Hatred of Israel and therefore Jews, but but it stems from, when I was very young, the left was very pro-Israel.
Really?
Oh yes, oh yes, and a lot of Jews were, very far left and socialists and so on. Fine, great,
Yeah.
no reason not to. And Jews are in the forefront of the socialist movement from the beginning. But in the last 20 years or so, since Israel has achieved significant independence, it's been independent since '48, but it's now significantly independent and a very viable state economically and so
Yes.
on. The left has turned on it in a way that is just it's just anti-Semitic.
Right, and it's interesting you say that because our anti-Semitism barometer, our polling of the Jewish community, it has shown year after year that overwhelming proportions of Jews, around 90%, believe that biased coverage against Israel fuels anti-Semitism in the UK. And I'm wondering, do you think media outlets bear any responsibility for the rise in anti-Semitism that we have seen in the UK over the past years?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think there is some careless reporting of the Middle East. For example, when there are serious and tragic issues in Gaza, the film crews, not just from the BBC but from everybody, go into Gaza. They never disclose the terms on which they're allowed to film in Gaza. They're obviously escorted. They're only allowed to film those things which Hamas or Hezbollah or whoever will let them film, but that's never disclosed. Of course, when they go to Israel, they're free to move and film whatever they want and interview anybody they want in the streets and so on.
Yeah.
So there's a problem there that I see. Things that people perceive as bias and anti-Israel, over the years I've looked at a lot of complaints. In the end, it's the careless use of language or an ignorance of the history and an underappreciation of what it's like to live in Israel, which has been in a state of siege for the last 60 years. And there is a lack of understanding of that. Israel is seen as Goliath. It's seen as strong, mighty, all-powerful, militarily all-powerful, economically all-powerful, and so on. But if your family is living... we lived through that in the UK with the IRA terror attacks prior to the Good Friday Agreement and the peace settlement in the north of Ireland. But we lived in a siege mentality in the UK. All kinds of civil rights were suspended. Duly elected Sinn Féin members of Parliament weren't allowed to speak directly to camera or to microphone on the news broadcast. A lot of things happen. And that's what happens when you're in a siege mentality.
Right.
And innocent people are being bombed and killed and car bombed and so on. That's what happens. But there's a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
I think a lack of context. I don't think it's bias. I think it's ignorance, frankly.
Well, returning to the Oxford Street incident specifically, I'm wondering, why do you think the BBC has been alone among major media outlets in suggesting without evidence that the Jewish victims in the incident were also racist and therefore at least partially to blame?
Very poor journalism. I wouldn't put it down to anti-Semitism. It's very, very poor journalism. On the face of what we now know at the moment, it's just a very, very poor piece of journalism. To describe the anti-Semitic taunts from the people who launched the attack, which you can see on film. There's no way you can describe the anti-Semitism as alleged, which is what the BBC report says. They then said there were clearly anti-Islamist cries from the bus. There is no evidence for that. It may be true. There may have been. I don't know. But there is no evidence that anyone has found so far to support that. And the BBC has got to explain two things. why it defended the broadcast without really understanding the nature of the complaint and examining the evidence. And then two, how on earth did they come to make such a pig's ear of their reportage?
Yeah. Well, for a bit of background now, our polling also shows that a majority of British Jews are not satisfied by the BBC's handling of anti-Semitism complaints, which again is a figure far worse for the BBC than any other major broadcasters. And historically, the BBC has handled complaints internally. And only relatively recently has Ofcom been given a role whereby if the BBC rejects complaints at every stage, a complainant can now escalate the matter to Ofcom. But few members of the public have patience to get through this uniquely drawn out process, which they have to do because the BBC so consistently rejects anti-Semitism complaints. Why is the BBC so resistant to acknowledging error, both in this case and over the years?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question. When you say complaints of anti-Semitism, are you talking about BBC reporting of anti-Semitism or the BBC itself being accused of anti-Semitism?
I suppose people would accuse the BBC of anti-Semitism due to their shoddy reporting of anti-Semitism.
Okay. Well, the first thing to say is that I have found, because I have complained to the BBC, even as a former chairman and as a former senior executive in the corporation, I have complained to the BBC, and without exception, the first complaint has gone into the programme makers, the editorial people, and without exception, they come back always. They're never wrong. They always come back straight away. The default position is we're not wrong. Then when you dig into it and you escalate it to the BBC's formal complaints procedure, there's a bit more work done, forensic evidence collecting, and eventually, I don't think I've ever lost a complaint against the BBC at that stage. So the problem lies with the editorial teams, who seem incapable of admitting quickly that they're wrong. And I think that's a very serious failing. What they don't understand is that admitting you're wrong and admitting quickly that you're wrong is a sign of strength, not of weakness. And I think they seem to see it as a sign of weakness, which it isn't, of course.
I'm quite curious, what do you think the BBC or Ofcom or the government needs to do to restore the confidence of the Jewish community in the BBC? And conversely, is there anything the Jewish community needs to grasp in order to understand the BBC better?
There is a process laid down. In first instance, you can either go to, let's say, I'm making this up now, let's say it's a Panorama programme. You can write to the editor of Panorama and say, you've got this wrong, this is disgraceful, blah, 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 blah. You'll get a reply, which will usually be, no, we stand by what we broadcast for this reason, that reason. Then you've got to be patient. You've got to go into the BBC's formal complaints mechanism procedure, which will take it more seriously. They will come up with a conclusion. If you're not happy with that, if you still think they're obfuscating and not addressing the complaint properly, you then go to Ofcom, which is entirely independent. I think the BBC's complaints procedure is very much independent of the editorial programme makers, but of course it's reliant on what the programme makers tell them and the evidence that the programme makers provide them with. But what I would say to the Jewish community, say to anybody who's got a complaint, be patient and follow it through, and check your complaint against the producer guidelines. You need to sometimes be a bit legalistic about it and say, in your producer guidelines, which are all on the website, it says in 4.3.1.9 or whatever, you have to be impartial. We believe that this broadcast was in breach of that particular section of the broadcast code. It was unfair. It was inaccurate. All of this is all covered in the code, and you make a formal complaint.
Yeah.
And I've always, in the end, I've always won. The complaints that I've made of varying nature.
Right. Well,
I had a big complaint against the BBC. I'm a trustee of Live Aid, Band Aid, and the World Service broadcast a programme that said a lot of the money that the public had given Live had gone to providing weapons for rebels in Ethiopia and so on and so on. Complete calumny, complete rubbish. And this went all around the world. It was on all the BBC services. Anyway, I complained. Bob Geldof and I complained formally. The Director General, who I appointed, by the way, I'd left the BBC by this point. I saw him. I said, "You better have a look at this, Mark, because it's quite a serious breach." No, he said, "I know all about it. He said, trusted journalism, we stand behind it." And eventually we demolished their defence completely, and the BBC complaints department did actually find in our favour. So you just got to be patient and play the process, go through the process.
Well, changing gears a bit, there's actually a big debate at the moment about the prospective privatization of Channel 4, and the license fee is endlessly discussed. More generally, do you think that some of the legacy broadcasters are too slow to adapt to the age of internet and on-demand streaming?
Some are, some aren't. Leave the BBC out of it because they have a secure income. ITV is doing well. Building up and growing its digital revenues. Channel 4 is hidebound because there's a limit to what it can do. It doesn't have access to capital, and it cannot own its own programs and so on. So Channel 4 has a problem to grow. So that's an issue that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
But I think they're all doing what they can.
Yeah. I mean, a broad question, what is the future of British broadcasting, in your opinion?
Well, tell me how long you're talking. I think the thing I've learned over the last 20 years of change is that the technology moves a lot faster than consumer habit. Yes, we buy the gadgets and we've got smartphones and we've got streaming and we've got all that, but our viewing habits change much slower, much more slowly.
Yeah.
So I think if you're saying will there be much life left in the linear public service broadcasters in 20 years' time, I'd have to say I'd be very worried. 10 years, they'll still be there.
Right. And what would you say to a young person who is looking to get into television today?
Go for it. It's a wonderful. It's expanding. Creative industries are expanding. It's a real growth sector in the UK. We're very good at it in this country. We're good at exporting. We're good at producing, creating. We have great skills. There's going to be a huge skills shortage looming soon in the film and television industries. It's a great career for anybody. Whether you want to be a sound engineer, a scene painter, whatever you want to be, a writer, director, an actor, whatever you want to be, a newsreader, or whatever. Fabulous careers. So I would encourage kids to look at this as a sector for a career. But you've got to want it. You've got to want it. It's no good playing at it. Oh, I think it'd be nice to read the news. Yeah, it would be nice. Yeah, go and do the hard yards first.
What would you recommend is the best way in? Do you recommend people just take anything, be the runner, get the coffee, just get your foot in the door?
Anything. Just get in. Anything. Take anything.
Yeah.
Do anything. And always be nice to people. Always. And work diligently. And you'll move on. I
think that's quite good general life advice.
I always tell people the story of Ridley Scott, the great Hollywood movie director, comes from the northeast of England. His father was a riveter in the shipyards in the northeast. He's now one of the world's greatest directors. How did that happen? He was determined. He set his eye on the prize. He had some talent, and he developed it and worked hard.
Yeah. Lord Grade, I want to thank you for doing this. But before we wrap up, I want to ask, what is your next big project? What have you got coming up?
Well, I'm just recovering from a back operation. So my immediate ambition is to get Matron to sign me back on games, which will be another few weeks yet. So my immediate ambition is to get out of the corset I'm wearing, which is supporting my back. But I do lots of different things. I enjoy my work in the House of Lords. I take it very seriously. I have various businesses I'm involved with, so I'm very active.
Yeah.
Can't help it. It's in the blood. It's my Ukrainian blood. I mean.
Lord.
We were originally Vinogradsky from Odessa.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the family name. Yeah, on my grandmother's side. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Have you ever had a chance to sort of go back to your roots and visit that area?
No. We might owe money, so I don't think I'll go back there. No, I don't know. No desire to go back. I don't think there's much point in going back.
Yeah.
Rather look forward.
Good advice. Lord Grade, I wish you a speedy recovery and want to thank you for appearing on Podcast Against Antisemitism.